Alrighty, I think I have this thing figured out. So let me know in the comments below if you can see me and hear me because I have never used this program before. So gonna I'm gonna wait and see if some people stop by before I start talking about the discussion subject. Alrighty. All right, so I think I'm actually going to go ahead and just start with some writing right now because people are still not here yet because I didn't really announce this ahead of time. I just sort of jumped on. So I'm going to start with maybe a 15-minute, maybe just 10-minute writing sprint. And then when some people hop on, hopefully, then we can talk about the discussion subject for today because I really hope that people will come by and talk with me. I mean, I can just talk at the camera like I usually do, but the whole point of doing the live stream was so that it'll be an actual discussion and you guys can talk with me. So hopefully that will work out. But for now, we're going to start with some writing. So if anyone pops in while I'm writing, that's what I'm up to. And we'll see how it goes. So let's see. Set my timer for 15 minutes. And there we go. All right, that is time. And there's a few people here now, so we can talk. Destiny says, if anyone wants to add me on NanoSite, my username is Fate Orchid. I'm sad the new site erased our buddies. I am sad about that too. That was annoying because everybody has different names and sometimes you can't just look them up by their actual name. So that is frustrating to try to find new buddies, but I will definitely add you. My name is the same on the NanoSite as it is on here, just Castiel. So if anyone wants to add me, you can. So I wanted to do this stream. There aren't a lot of people watching, but maybe you guys will have some thoughts. And if not, then people can watch it afterwards and respond. But I was talking to some people about, also, I'm sorry if things are a little like weird on this stream today. I've never used this program before, so I'm still kind of getting used to it. So be nice to me. But anyway, so I was talking to some people about the subject of how responsible artists are, particularly writers, because that's what we all are. So that's what I'm going to talk about. How responsible are we for someone taking something we wrote and twisting it and using it for evil or for some purpose that we didn't intend? And I just thought that it was a really interesting discussion. So I thought it would be fun to talk to you all about it. And I was going to do like a video about it, but I thought it might be more interesting to do a live stream so that you guys can respond in the comments and I can answer back to you and it can be more of a discussion instead of just me talking. Yes, Castiel is the angel from Supernatural. That is where my name comes from because I love him. So first things first, I'm going to just give my thoughts on the subject and then you guys can respond if you have any thoughts and we can hopefully chat about it. So my thoughts on this are kind of like in the middle. I think that there's a lot to talk about and a lot of people have different valid perspectives on this. And I wouldn't say that there are no wrong answers, but I would say that most of the time when I have this discussion, I feel like everyone's points are valid. So um, basically, I feel like hypothetically, if someone were to write a story that, let's say, features, well, I'm trying to think of an example that's not the book that I'm writing because I don't want this whole thing to just become about that. Um, so, I mean, let's say like someone writes a murder mystery and they describe a way that a body is hidden or like a way that someone is murdered and it's like kind of creative and maybe like, I mean, not a good idea, of course, because murder is not a good idea, but it's like something that would be effective in evading the police. Um, is that author then responsible, or is it their fault if someone reads their book and then goes out and performs that crime in the way that they wrote about because it was like a brilliant way to do a crime? My thoughts are that I don't think that it's the author's fault or responsibility. I would say those are the wrong words. But on the other hand, I do think that writers, well, I don't want to say that they have a responsibility. I think that if hypothetically I were the author who wrote that story and then that thing happened because of the story I wrote, I can't say that I wouldn't feel like a little bad about that or like oh man, that really sucks that someone was harmed and they probably wouldn't have been harmed if I hadn't written this thing, even though obviously my intent was not for someone to use this for harm. So that's kind of my thoughts on the subject, and I'd love to hear what any of you guys think. I don't know if this is the best time to do this discussion, though, because I did not announce this ahead of time very much, so there are not very many people in the chat. So we might have to postpone this for another time. But if you have any thoughts on the discussion, you can certainly add them, and if not, maybe we'll do a couple more sprints. I don't have a lot of time to be on here, but also I should mention that the chat for this program is it lags a little bit behind, so sometimes I can see your guys' comments on YouTube before I can see them on the program I'm using. So it might take me a minute to get to your comments. Destiny says, I don't think we are responsible for other actions. I think that is true. I think it depends, because it depends on what you're writing. Because I think if you, sorry, Sailor says, absolutely not the author's fault. It's a book. The objective of writing is to write, not to be the inspiration for evildoers. I agree, except for if you actually are writing a subject and like portraying something evil as good, then I think that kind of is like you are putting a thought out there into the world and encouraging others to believe something that is wrong. Like that kind of falls into the line of like inciting violence at that point. If for instance you started writing about a murder mystery where the murderer is like the good guy, and I mean, and I'm not talking about like Dexter or something, because that kind of story, the theme of the book, even though the murderer is the protagonist, like it's very clear that we are supposed to think that he's wrong. But if you're writing a book where we aren't supposed to think that the person killing a bunch of people is wrong, and you're portraying that as a good thing, then I think it is kind of your responsibility to not like encourage that kind of thing. But if you're not writing about that and someone else is just twisting your words or misinterpreting the situation, then I don't think that you are responsible for that. Emma says, if the author writes the violence/bad thing as a call to action, then it is bad. Yes, that is kind of what I was getting at right there. I agree with that. Destiny says, this conversation reminds me of the conversation in the second Scream movie during Brandy's film class. I have not seen that movie, so I can't really comment on that. But yeah, I think the issue I was struggling with was, while I don't think that the author is responsible for like someone misinterpreting their message and using it for evil, if that's not what if they aren't actually saying this is good, if someone's just reading it and thinking they're saying that and they're not, I don't think they're responsible. But at the same time, like it is kind of a difficult subject when you're gonna write about something controversial, because even if you're not very good at getting your message across, or you maybe aren't as clear as you think you're being or whatever, then it's not that you're responsible, but at the same time, like, would you feel bad if you found out that someone used something you wrote for evil? And I think that, like, I would, to a degree. I wouldn't feel like it was my fault necessarily, or that people should blame me for someone else doing something bad. but I would kind of question, like, should I have written that? Because if I hadn't written that, then that wouldn't have happened. Um, so that's kind of the issue I've been pondering lately. Um, and this whole conversation kind of sparked with, and I don't want to make it sound like, well, whatever. I'll just say what I'm going to say. This whole conversation sparked from the fact that I am currently writing a book that features an age gap relationship between a girl who is 17 and a guy who is, I haven't quite decided yet, but probably somewhere around like 25 to 27 years old. And in the book, I'm not portraying that relationship as a bad thing. I am going to be addressing the complications of being in a relationship like that. And the whole point is kind of the forbidden love aspect of the couple. So obviously, I'm going to be addressing the fact that people in their town don't think that this is a good thing, and they like judge them and think that he's a creep or whatever. And so I'm going to be discussing the negatives of that and why people might think that that's not a good idea. Um, but at the end of the day, I'm not portraying that as if it is wrong. So some people are saying that that like, well, how would you feel if someone read your book and then used it to justify their actions of like pursuing relationships with young underage girls? And I would say, like, I, in a way, I would be upset if something bad happened because of my book, but at the same time, I don't think that I'm responsible for that because that's not what I'm advocating for at all. So, yeah, I just thought that that was a valid question for that person to ask, and I appreciate the way they phrased that question because some people in the conversation were just saying like, "No, you're terrible, you're evil, you should never write something like that, and it's bad, and you just shouldn't write it at all." And she wasn't saying, "Don't write it." She was saying, "Well, ask yourself these questions. Ask yourself if hypothetically you wrote this book and it led to something bad happening, or some creepy guy reading it and being like, yeah, see, I can date teenagers, it's fine. Um, how would you feel about that?" She wasn't saying don't do it. She was just encouraging me to think about that. And I think that that is a valid question. Um, I have determined that I don't think that that's my responsibility, and that I'm still going to write the book because it's important to me. And I don't think I'm not going to be advocating for everybody to go date underage girls. And, I'm not going to be pretending or presenting this as if all age gap relationships are fine and good and, you know, stuff like that. So, Sailor says E.L. James wrote BDSM relationship, and suddenly everyone who knew the subject of the story, not even the full story, sparked an entire readership of sexier relationships. Um, yeah, that is true. People don't even need to use any books or materials to justify their actions, no matter the actions. They would love to use or abuse something, any their bad behavior. I think that's a very, very, very good point. About this, and he was saying like, if hypothetically with like the murder mystery situation, if someone's out there reading a book about a murder mystery and they're like, oh, this is a really good way to kill somebody, I'm gonna do that. It's like, that person was probably already thinking about killing somebody. Like, nobody's just reading a book and they're like, yeah, I think I will do that. It's already probably something that they're going to do. um, but on the other hand, my argument was, well, maybe the idea that the author presented was smarter than their idea, and maybe the author's idea would help them to kill more people before the police can catch them than if they had done it without that like extra knowledge or whatever. Um, but again, I just feel the same way. I feel like the author, it's not their responsibility and it's not their fault. But I do think it's valid to think about if you're going to be writing something controversial, to consider how you would feel if it was misinterpreted, which doesn't mean don't write it necessarily. It just means make sure that you are very clear in your message. Um, so yeah, and I do think it's funny what Sailor said about like people judging 50 Shades of Grey without even reading it, which I mean, I guess I'm kind of guilty of that myself, because I haven't read the book. I have read some parts of it, and I do think it's a very like I don't really agree with BDSM at all. But if two people are consenting, then that's like okay. But I don't think that the from what I've read and what I've heard of that book, I don't think that it was portrayed in a way that is healthy. I think that was just an abusive relationship. And I actually think if E.L. James had written the 50 Shades of Grey series as an example of an abusive relationship, and if she had like portrayed the whole thing as like, here's this relationship, see how abusive relationships come about, and maybe at in the end either Anastasia didn't end up with Christian, or maybe she did, but it was very obvious that it was like not the right choice and that there were a lot of complications, then I think that would actually be really awesome. I think that would be a really good book series, to show, kind of the same thing. Some people say that like Edward and Bella is kind of an abusive relationship. I don't really agree with that, honestly, but I do see how some of his behaviors are a little bit like kind of controlling. And I think, again, if the author wrote that kind of relationship and said, I wrote this because I wanted to show what a controlling, like somewhat unhealthy relationship looks like so that people can like notice that more and to start a discussion, then I think that that's a really great thing, because I think we should discuss these things. And I think there's kind of like a dangerous, I don't know, a dangerous like trend going on nowadays. I feel, this is my opinion. It's fine if you disagree. I don't think you're stupid or something if you don't agree with this, but I personally think it's not a good trend that we are trying so hard to like censor things and like stop talking about controversial things in case like someone misunderstands it or whatever, because it's the real world. I mean, there are some terrible things in the world, and I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about them. And I actually think there's something wrong with intentionally never talking about them, especially with like teenagers. Because, I mean, there's something to be said about kind of sheltering children and keeping them innocent for an appropriate amount of time. But when you're like moving up into adulthood, it's like, okay, it's time to maybe learn how to hear about something bad and have a discussion about it, and rationalize your own thoughts on why that is wrong, instead of people just telling you it's wrong. Um, so that's kind of my 2 cents on the subject. I also think, going back to like the 50 Shades of Grey example, I think there's a problem with so many people like judging something as bad without even like knowing about more about it, like never having read it or heard anything. I mean, I don't think you necessarily have to read the book if you maybe have read reviews of the book that like include quotes from the book. Sometimes that can be taken out of context, but sometimes it's pretty clear that it's like a good representation of what the story is. But I think it's like dangerous to judge things before you even know anything about the subject. Like that's that's the issue I was having with my discussion about my story that I'm writing, because there is an age gap relationship, and I was just trying to start a discussion about what do you guys think of this, and if you read a book with a girl who was 17 and a guy who was like 27, would that be like, no matter how good their relationship is, you would not like that book just because of that? Or like, would it be better if he was a little younger, like 25 or something? Because I don't want to write a book that everyone's just gonna hate. Um, but a lot of people were just like hardcore judging the book that hasn't even been written yet, um, based on things that just aren't applicable at all. Like, well, you don't want to encourage like an abusive relationship or some like dangerous power dynamic between the two. And I'm like, okay, but these characters aren't in an abusive relationship, and there isn't this power struggle that you're talking about. So like that's a valid concern if that was present in the story, but it's not. So I think that in general, you just need to like not judge stories or situations before you know anything about them. That would probably be good. AS Howell is here. Yay! She says, LOL, you already know how much I hate censoring. I do indeed, and I agree with you. Sailor says, the story I'm writing about a real life story where two friends are stalked and hurt through the internet, and the violence spreads into the real world. Yeah, I think that's a good idea for a story. I honestly think a lot of people would not think that, though, and that's the problem I have. Is a lot of people nowadays would think there's something wrong about that, like writing a story like that, because you're writing about something bad or negative or like dangerous. But if you're portraying it as bad and negative and dangerous, then that's just real life. This is something that needs to be known, that internet arguments can lead to real world problems like assault, harassment, stalking. Yes, that is definitely true. I think that's a really great idea for a story. And especially for, like, I don't know what your audience is, but I think a young adult audience would be really good for that. Something they really need to learn. Didn't they say the same thing about the Joker? I don't know. I I've kind of intentionally not been watching a lot of Joker reviews because I haven't seen the movie yet and I really want to. But I know there has been some controversy about the Joker, and I think it was basically that that it's like, but he's a bad guy, and it's like, yeah, he's the Joker. That's kind of the point. It's just interesting. I did have someone on my thread about the whole age gap relationship situation pointed out something really good, which I agree with. They actually like work with teenagers. I don't know if they were a teacher or something like that, counselor or something, but they were talking about the fact that a story like that would actually maybe be a really good thing to present to a young adult audience if it's in a setting where they can like discuss it with an adult present and also like their peers, and talk about whether or not um, whether or not that relationship is good, and is it okay that they are dating even though there's that big of an age gap and she's underage, or is it not okay? And that's the thing, is I just don't believe in, like, I guess, like, sheltering teenagers so much from ideas like that, because I understand that some teenagers are kind of impressionable, and they might read a book like that and like stupidly think, "Oh, that means I should go date a 27-year-old guy." And it's like, "Okay, but that's not what I said." Um, but it's like, if someone is in that state of mind where they're that impressionable, then personally, I think their parents should be monitoring what they're watching or reading more. Because if you know that your child is really easily just like gives into peer pressure, then maybe like pay a little bit more attention to what they're putting into their heads. But for the most part, I think that people need to be allowed to have those thoughts and also to learn from mistakes too. Like maybe someone is really impressionable and gives into peer pressure easily, and maybe when they give into that peer pressure, something bad happens and they learn, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And maybe I should think a little more and not just do what some book said to do, or just because this relationship in this book worked out well doesn't mean that that's going to work out for me the same way. Like if that's not already something that they just know, because it seems like it's something most people should just already know. But if they don't know that for some reason, then maybe making a mistake is the way that they learn that. So I just think people need to stop babying like 16, 17-year-old kids. They're not kids anymore. They're almost adults, and they need to be able to like think about these things and talk about these things. Yes, they started saying the Joker Harley Quinn relationship was abuse. Yeah, I mean, it is. That's kind of the whole point. They're bad people. They're the bad guys. Like, I actually thought that was in Suicide Squad. That was like literally the only thing about that movie that I actually liked was the Joker Harley Quinn relationship, because I thought it was like just a perfect visual representation of an abusive relationship. And nobody was saying that that was good. I mean, nobody who made the movie was trying to imply that that was a healthy relationship. So that's kind of the point. Doll is here. Hello. And ASL says, true, we probably need to put more pressure on parents rather than society. I absolutely agree with that for sure. I think that's where most of the disagreement comes. And that's why, again, I don't think that like anyone who disagrees with me on this is stupid or terrible or whatever. We just have a difference of opinion that we both want teenagers to be safe. We just have a difference of opinion on how we should go about handling that. I think it should be more of the parents' responsibility to, make sure, especially because it really comes down to an individual, because some 16-year-old kids are way more ready and able to handle like a dark subject and think through it for themselves than others. Some are just not ready for that. And the only people who can really know that well is their parents. So you need to be the ones keeping track of that and monitoring what they're putting into their minds. I liked the relationship and I thought Harley's view was good. I didn't see the Joker movie yet, but like I said, as far as Suicide Squad, which was a total mess and a terrible movie, but I thought their relationship was really interesting to watch as well. But yeah, there was one interview where guy acted like it was a healthy relationship for the bad guys. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, I guess if a relationship is like it's not healthy objectively, but like from their worldview might be considered healthy, which kind of makes sense. Um, Safe but not sheltered. Safe teens but not sheltered teens. I agree with that. I think sheltering too much is actually the opposite of helpful as far as safety. I think that can be damaging to people who go out into the real world as adults and they haven't really been taught how to handle those kinds of dark subjects that exist in the world because they just haven't seen them. I mean, how people that's how we end up with adults who are really naive and don't understand like that you need to be careful and like protect yourself. Doll says I was way too overprotected until I was like 22, aka when I left that place. One thing is to keep the young ones safe, another is sheltering them from the world completely. That's also unhealthy. I agree. That pretty much we said the same thing. Yeah, I agree with that. Sailor says bad guys have feelings too, but they kind of have a screwed up view of a relationship. Yes, that is definitely true. And again, is a good thing to show in a movie. Like it's interesting. I'm just interested in psychology, so I like the psychology of all kinds of people, good people or bad people or like people with different views. It fascinates me to try to think about how they got that view and why they think that way because that kind of stuff doesn't just come out of nowhere. Like there are genetic factors and biological factors and there's like upbringing and it's just everything is interesting to me. I really don't think in my opinion there aren't too many subjects that are like off limits. I think as long as you're making sure that you as the creator are clear in in your stance on what's right and wrong, that's good. But also at the same time, I think that there are some subjects that are a little bit more subjective, and you can like I don't want my author to like ram it down my throat that they think this is bad and this is good. Like sometimes it's nice to have a controversial subject and have it be completely up to the reader to decide what they think based on the complications they've seen in the story, which is kind of what my book is going to be like, I think. I mean, I haven't written it yet, but I want to show the like negative side of like an age gap relationship and the complications that can arise from that. But I also want to show the positive side and that I think sometimes people are too quick to just be like, oh, that's bad and that guy's a creep and she has something wrong with her for liking him or whatever. It's like, okay, but you don't know anything about them and why they came together, how they fell in love, how they met. Like there's a big difference to me between a guy like in his late 20s going out scouring the streets for teenagers to date versus like a guy who just has a lot of friends who maybe are younger for whatever reason. Maybe there's not a lot of people his age in his area. I mean, when I grew up in high school, I was friends with mostly when I was a senior in high school, I would say most of my friends, a lot of my friends were freshmen in high school because those are just the people that I got along with. And on the opposite end, when I was in college, I dated a guy who was 33 when I was 19 and he was just a person that I liked. And it wasn't like I was out there like, oh, which of these guys is a lot older than me? I'm gonna pick that guy. Like it was just a person that I met and I liked him and we dated like any other relationship. And same thing on his part. He wasn't out there trying to search for young girls to date. So there's just a whole lot of factors and it's I think wrong to just judge people without knowing all of those factors. So that is my opinion on that. I hate it when I can see your guys' comments on YouTube, but they haven't come to me yet on the StreamYard site, so I can't put them up on the screen and respond to them. But I do see your comments. They will be here shortly. Doll says, I always, always, always am friends with older people. Why? I don't know. It is what it is. I'm kind of the same. I mean, like I said, in high school, I had when I was 18, I think, 17 or 18, I was dating a guy who was like, I think he was 14 when we started dating, and then he turned 15. Um, so I was friends with mostly his friends, which is why I had a lot of younger friends. Um, but also, I went to a very small school, and a lot of the people my age were just like not. I mean, there wasn't anything wrong with them. They just weren't the kinds of like personalities of people I really get along with. And I also, because I went to a really small school, most of my friends were from church, and my church was also really small. And there were also not like any people there that were my age. They were all either like quite a bit younger than me or quite a bit older than me. So I just always grown up having ages of friends that vary from like maybe 5 years older or younger than me. And I never really viewed them as different. Like they were all just my friends and we were all like equals in my mind. So some people are just like that. Sailor says, I can help you writing this age gap relationship because I watched my cousin go through it. I was almost arranged marriage to a guy who was 35 years old when I was 16. So I know the inside life of an age gap relationship. That's really interesting. Um, I wonder what was the situation surrounding the arranged marriage. Was it like a religious thing or a cultural thing? Because that's not very common these days anymore. Um, I actually have a lot of personal experience myself with age gap relationships. So, like I said, in high school, I was about 3 years older than my boyfriend, and in college, I dated a guy who was about 14 years older than me, and my husband is like 7.5 years older than me, and my parents are 8 years apart as well. So I like it's a subject that's really prevalent in my life, and it's just like it is what it is. I've never thought that it was weird or bad, and to me, it's like one of those subjects that I'm excited to write about because I love forbidden romance. And the thing about writing a forbidden romance is that the reason it's interesting is because it's forbidden. So obviously that means you have to be writing something that a lot of society thinks is wrong. Otherwise, it wouldn't be forbidden. So the very nature of a forbidden romance story is that a lot of people are not going to like it because they're going to be on the side of the people in the story who think that this relationship shouldn't be allowed. Um, but the key to me of writing a forbidden romance is that it has to be about something that society says is wrong, but that you don't think society is correct about. Um, and so that is kind of where I am with the whole age gap thing. I think there are a lot of reasons why it's valid to be cautious about age gap relationships, especially when we're talking about, and honestly, I mean, pretty much solely when we're talking about like including a minor, because well, if we're talking about like someone who's 30 dating someone who's 50, like I don't give one single crap about that. Date whoever you want, it's fine. But when we're talking about like someone who's a teenager or close to that age, that's where it gets complicated. And I think that there are a ton of valid reasons to be concerned about that and to not advocate that as if it's always okay, because it's definitely not always okay. Definitely not every 17-year-old is anywhere near being ready to be in like a relationship with someone older. But I think there are a lot of people in that situation who are. When I was 17, I was super ready to find like someone to marry and settle down with. I was not interested in like partying and hanging out with friends and like just I just wasn't interested in that stuff. I wanted to get married and start living that life. And that's just mostly based on like how I was raised, because I was raised in a Christian home, and like I said, my parents are 8 years apart. They were 18 and 26 when they got married. My mom was 18, and my sister got married when she was 19, and she has 3 kids now, and started having kids pretty much right away. And I got married when I was 20. So it's just, when I was 17, that was 3 years before I got married. So I was pretty ready to be looking for something serious. But that's not everyone's situation, so it's not to say that that's always a good idea. But I just think it's equally wrong to say that it's never a good idea, which is what I have a problem with. I'm not in an age gap relationship, but I have a very close friend who is way older than me. I could tell you more in private. Yeah, I'd love to hear more. Whatever you want to share with me, hit me up on Facebook or something. The arranged marriage was due to being a traditional Asian. Oh, okay, interesting. Arranged marriage is still a thing in today's age. It's just not publicized. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. That's for sure. I don't think it's maybe quite as common as it was in the past, at least not everywhere. It is still common in some areas, but there are some areas where it's just not really. It's kind of a weird thing. Um, so anyway, that's my opinion on that. Some of you weren't here when we were talking earlier. We were discussing whether or not how much authors should be responsible for someone like misinterpreting their work and using it for something evil. Like with the age gap example, if someone read my book that's about a relationship between someone who's 17 and someone who's in their mid to late 20s, if someone read that and then decided like, oh yeah, that's cool, that means that, I, a 27-year-old man, should go try to hook up with a teenager, like, that's obviously not the message I'm spreading or advocating for. So how much responsibility should the author feel for someone misinterpreting their work and using it for something bad? That was kind of the initial discussion topic here, and I think we've kind of been over it. But if anyone else who's jumping in has anything to add, that would be cool. I don't think I'm going to be doing any more writing sprints because I don't really have the time, and also honestly, my story is not like, I don't have enough solidified in my mind yet to start fully drafting it. I just recently decided that it's going to be maybe 2 or 3 books instead of 1 book. So everything's changing, which I'm excited about because I think it's going to make the story a lot better and deeper and richer. But I need to like revisit my entire outline. So I'm not really ready to draft right now. Doll says she's not drafting right now, she's editing, so no issues there. Yeah, so unless anyone has anything else to add, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I just thought it was an interesting discussion, and I'm going to leave this video up, so if anyone's watching this back later and you want to add stuff in the comments, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, because it's one of those things that I feel like people who are, I feel this way about so many things, that people who are super far on one side and super far on the other side, like they're both wrong. Like there's a middle ground that is to be had here. Um, it's like people who think that authors are responsible for other people twisting their words and using it for evil, and that they should be really, really careful about what they write in case it might be misinterpreted. I think that's wrong. I'm I like I think people can literally twist absolutely anything to be something evil if they want to. If that's their desire, they will find a way to make that happen. So I think if you are that far on this side of the argument, then you just can't write anything really. Certainly not anything even remotely controversial or like deep or serious. So I think that's wrong. But then on the other side of the coin, I think there are people who go way too far in saying like, I'm not responsible for what people do with my work, so I can write whatever I want, and if someone misinterprets it, like that's their fault. Like I think going too far in that direction is wrong too, because then you're just stripping away all of your personal responsibility for what you're putting out into the world. And I don't think that's correct either, because if I wrote this book about this age gap relationship and I failed to portray any kind of negative, like I just acted as if it was completely normal and everybody like is fine with it and it's never a problem. There's no reason to be concerned or like hesitant. I think that would be wrong. I think that would be a bad message to send to the world, because there are reasons to be cautious, and so that's what I'm going to portray is my character, especially my male character, being very cautious about his feelings for this girl and very hesitant to pursue that until he really knows that he thinks it's okay despite the controversy. Um, so yeah, people on both sides, if you're too far in one direction or the other, like you start to neglect like all of the stuff in the middle that is really important. So Sailor says, question, do you collaborate writing and publish a story with any authors before? I have not done that before. I'm not sure that I ever would. I I don't know if I don't know. In some ways, it would really depend on the person, but I am really not very good at. It's funny because I feel like I present sometimes as if I'm kind of cool with a little bit of controversy and stuff, but I actually really don't like conflict in like my real life. So if I was writing a story with someone and they like gave me their chapters back and they were terrible, I would just be like, I don't want to do this anymore then. Like I don't I'm not really comfortable telling someone that their work is bad if it's like really bad. If there are just some things that I think I would change, then that's a good conversation to be had. Um, but if it's like, this is just really, really horrible, then I would just, uh, I don't think I could do it. So it would really depend on the person, but I think I would probably not ever be interested in doing that. I don't know why you're asking. Maybe you're in that situation, or, um, but I did actually, when I was in high school, I had a friend during this camp we were at, we came up with this idea for a story and we were super excited about it and we were going to start writing it together. And then that never went anywhere because we were just teenagers and didn't really like it wasn't really a very serious idea. But yeah, I think I would find it really difficult to work with someone else in writing. It's a very like solitary act for me personally. I love writing about subjects that are forbidden, different, and out there. Me too. That is one of my favorite things. My favorite thing to read is forbidden love. That's my favorite like romance trope or trope in general, I guess. Um, so I was really excited about this story, because as I said before, one of the keys to forbidden love is finding a topic that society doesn't like, but that you think there's a lot of gray area in, and that it is acceptable sometimes. Um, so obviously, I don't want to write a forbidden love story about, like, I don't know, something that I think is wrong, because that would be stupid. My first two books are kind of forbidden love also. Keep No Record is, I guess, like, there's some Beauty and the Beast vibes, as far as like the guy kind of being the bad guy in the story, who's like redeemable and like feels bad and wants to change, but um, you know, not not being there yet, and he kind of kidnaps a girl, sort of. I wouldn't really use the word kidnap, but it's like the easiest word to use to describe the situation. And they have a bit of a romance, so that's definitely forbidden love. And then my second book also follows that same male character from the first book, and his relationship with someone who shall remain nameless at this time. Um, and that's there's a lot of kind of that one's not as much of a forbidden love, because outwardly, like, there's nothing wrong with them being together, but he is he does have a very, like, checkered past. So there's a lot of, like, um, it's a situation that I wouldn't advocate everybody go date someone who tells you that he's killed 4 people. You know, that's a little bit controversial and a little bit forbidden, but in this situation, it works out. Or does it? You'll have to read it to find out. Um, Dahl says, I think it would be difficult to find a matching voice. Yeah, I agree if you're writing with someone else. The only way that I think I would maybe write a book with someone else, which I actually think would be kind of cool. My husband and I have actually talked about it, because he's not a writer, but he really likes storytelling. And I think he could be a writer if he wanted to and like pursued it and learned. But we've talked about, like, if if someone wrote a romance that was like multi POV, and like I wrote the female chapters and he wrote the male chapters or something, like that would be really interesting, because in that sense it would actually be cool that the voices would not match. That would be relevant and make sense. And it's actually kind of hard for one author to write a multi POV book without making the voices all sound the same. So that would actually be fun. I think that's the only situation I can think of where I would write with somebody else. There's a forbidden love story in Wait, sorry. There is a forbidden love in my story too. Wait, actually more than one relationship is forbidden. Nice. You got to tell me when that is finished, because I would love to read it. I am all about that forbidden romance. All right. I think we've kind of covered all the topics I wanted to discuss. So thank you guys for being here and chatting with me. If anybody's watching this back later and you have anything to add to the discussion, go ahead and comment down below and I will respond when I have the time. So thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight, today, this morning, wherever, whatever time it is, where you are. 4 o'clock where I am. So, yeah. So that's going to be it. And now I know how to live stream. So that's really handy. I kind of was using this as practice because NaNoWriMo is starting soon. And I'm definitely going to be doing some live write-ins on my channel. I don't know what day yet. I will get back to you guys on that. But I'm going to be doing live write-ins. I'm going to do weekly nano vlogs. So you can look out for that and get to hear more about my ever so controversial age gap romance book, because that's the book I'm going to be working on. So yeah, that's it from me today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.